You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Okay, now we're starting. I had to sniff a couple of times before we actually started recording. Last week's episode, or not last week's because we were off last week, but the episode 378, so the last episode of the podcast,
Yes.
right? The fawn response, that whole thing. That was a really impactful episode for us. And we've been really pleased and surprised at the, the reaction that it's gotten. And so we just want to thank everybody that listened and everybody that sent up some words of support and love and everything else. Because again, it was a really challenging, hard episode for us. And if you haven't listened to it, then go back and listen to it. But this episode, we're going to be talking about something completely different. And I think we're going to kind of finish out the rest of the year with maybe some easier, lighter kind of topics, simply because
That's our goal.
we have been swimming in some heavy things lately, right?
And who knows? Because, when we say we're going to keep it light.
Yeah, it lasts for about 5.5 minutes.
So we're going to see how it goes and just be open to what happens. And maybe it'll be light.
So the last couple of days, or
Maybe it'll be flight.
maybe we're leaving.
Maybe I'll leave. I'm running out the room.
But the last couple of days, I've been trying to articulate to you how this episode, like what I wanted to talk about on this episode and what it felt like to me and kind of what it looked like, I guess, in a sense, in my mind, right? Because to me, it feels like a really big issue that I'm facing and dealing with. And every time I try to describe it to you, you're like, yeah, that maybe it'll make sense on the podcast because it doesn't seem to really land.
Well, to be fair, I've been really diving deep into a lot of my own things right now. And I've been spending a lot of time. So the fact that it wasn't resonating at the moment might just be because I've distracted, but I'm here now. I'm full attention right here for this podcast topic, and we'll see.
So I had a moment of clarity before we pushed record on what I'm trying to actually explain.
Oh, good.
But I'm going to explain it the silly, kind of fucked up way that I explained it to you first, so then they get that experience as well. I feel like I am stuck between like two generations, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about the upbringing that we had, our childhood. And I say us, even though it was so different, right? But we grew up during the same period.
Same period of time, very different upbringings.
Yeah. You were born in 80. I was born in 81.
Vastly different.
And so we have a lot of similar life experiences that we had to go through and navigate. And
and it's
that generation.
We also grew up like in the same county, just in different towns, neighboring towns. Yeah. So it's like there's a lot of
shared experiences. Yeah. But that time, or that generation, so like we kind of border, depending upon who you're talking to, that Gen X and millennial, quote unquote, generation, right? And what it brings up in me when I think about it or when I feel it is it feels like I'm in this in-between space between how things used to be versus how things are today. And what I mean by that is it's like I see it in the ways that I outwardly see the world, right? There's a part of me that can kind of see the world through the lens of what I would label as like that boomer generation, right? Our parents' generation, the generation that was kind of before us, where they were very much, it was very black and white thinking, right and wrong thinking, very clear, like this is how things are supposed to be.
Do you know what's so weird?
Go ahead.
Isn't that like the same generation as like Woodstock and all of that?
I think so.
So how did that generation turn into such a black and white? I feel like that is like the expression of love and freedom and the wild and like owning your own. And they had this time frame, like maybe, but this time frame, I know my mom did, just like of this, like it really embodying all this energy and this wild and this.
Yeah.
And then they turn, and then it's like, what happened?
What happened?
What happened?
Right?
Yeah.
And you could probably say that about our generation
probably,
too.
right?
Like that's what I'm recognizing is it's like this thing that I'm feeling where I'm kind of stuck between these two generations where I can very much lean into like that frame of thinking that we were raised with where it was like children should be heard and not seen. They, all of those kind of like the ways that we were parented, not parented, the ways that we were raised by our parents. Like there's a lot of that stuff that feels like the right way to do things.
Right.
And then I have another part of me that can see so clearly how fucked up all of that stuff was,
Right.
and how wrong it was in the way that we were raised and brought up. And I'm not just talking about our parents, but like I was thinking about how when I was a child, it wasn't uncommon for you to get physically disciplined by other adults in your life, whether it be teachers or coaches or, do you know what I mean? And sometimes it was like them coming up and grabbing you on the shoulder or, pulling your ear. I'm sure that I'm trying to think, I don't think I was ever hit by a teacher or a coach or something like that, but there was like, it was acceptable in society to just discipline children, right?
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that agrees with that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But at the same, not the physical part.
Yeah.
Even though there is a part of me that like can see, this is what I'm talking about, right? And this is the conversation that I want to have. But I'm recognizing as I'm trying to unpack all of it through this lens of like, oh, I'm stuck between two generations. And there's a part of me that thinks it's okay to spank kids. And there's a part of me that doesn't think it's okay to spank kids. What's really happening is just this beautiful ongoing process of me challenging my beliefs.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. What you were taught, what the agreements had, what you thought was the healthy normal, and then what you've unlearned and relearned a new way.
Right.
But there's still that like, this is
There's the
what
gray
life
area.
was,
Yeah,
and
there's
now
the
this
gray
is what
area
I
where
believe it
everything
to be.
has to take place, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm running everything through the filter of this new furnace and this
Yeah.
fire where it's like
That's
that
still
is so old and so outdated. And like first and foremost, I don't think it's okay to spank kids. I don't think there's ever a justifiable reason to physically put hands on in an abusive way, right? Spanking to me is abuse, even if it is like for their best interest, right? I'm teaching them to not touch the stove. I'm teaching them that they can't run out in traffic. I'm teaching them that they can't say those words. I don't think that spanking is ever the option for that.
right.
But I didn't used to think that,
Yeah.
right? I remember thinking that sometimes a little spank would go a long way to help in the, whatever, in the child rearing. Anyways, this isn't a podcast about spanking.
Right.
What it is it's me recognizing all of these beliefs that are being challenged within my own mindset, and they're beliefs about how I view the world. They're also beliefs about myself and my actions and my behaviors, and also just kind of like what is my actual belief system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I don't agree with this or that. I actually think it's this,
Right.
right? So that's what I want to discuss. Maybe
Okay.
does that help at all?
That does.
That makes it a little bit more contextual rather than me
Yeah.
talking about millennials and Gen Xers. And although I do think that
What do
our
you think?
generation
Uh-huh.
was the first generation that had to figure out, in some regards, right? I'm sure that all the things are always individualized, right? What I'm about to say, somebody else experienced prior to us, of course, right? But I think that overall, our generation was the first generation of kids that had to really learn how to raise themselves, right? Our parents both worked outside of the home, which meant there wasn't a main caregiver. So we had to learn how to do
Our
a lot of
generation got the
things.
term latchkey kids.
Right. And I'm sure that
I didn't have a latchkey to go to.
like, of course, there's going to be stories of other people that experience that type of
Right.
upbringing prior to us. Of course. But generally speaking, I think it was a really big shift when it came to what, quote unquote, like the normal family life was like, right?
Yeah.
And I also think that we're the first generation to start actually introspectively, consciously looking at changing patterns and emotional issues and like going to therapy and wanting to actually heal, as opposed to our parents' generation that was more in that mindset of like, don't talk about it, don't express it, stuff it down, avoid it.
Yeah.
You're
Make a joke.
You're weak if you have to go to therapy, like all
Yeah.
of those kind of things, right? Our generation is the one that started to change that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure the fucking, if we were to interview.
We're not saying this is spread across the board. This is our experience,
Yeah.
and this is
Craig's thoughts
yeah.
and where I'm at.
Right.
Right. But it feels that way. And I also feel like I have a lot of thoughts on this,
Okay.
obviously.
Yeah. You've been thinking about it, and I haven't.
It feels like everybody that I'm listening to, meaning like podcasts or social media, all the content that I'm consuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, it's because I'm in the same space of working on myself, but it seems like people that are in their late 30s to middle 40s, right, are knee deep in uncovering their shadow. They're knee deep in addressing their beliefs. They're knee deep in changing their lives up and shifting up patterns. Because everybody that I listen to, and now granted, like I said, I'm seeking out this type of content. So of course I'm going to be consuming this type of content. But there's something about this age range right now where I think a lot of us are doing really, really big work on really shifting up the way that, not just the way that things used to be, but the way that we used to be. We're seeing ourselves differently. We're thinking about things differently. We're trying to move through the world in a different way. And that's really inspiring. Like, I think that's really cool. So there's a lot of thoughts, babe. What do you think?
Well, I think that, like, who knows, right? But I think we definitely started that age range is the ones that are like, they're the ones that are going against the grain. They're the ones that are saying this isn't going to continue. And the challenging thing is that we didn't start this in our teens and our 20s. Some of you probably did. I didn't. It was something that came after we continued patterns, thinking that this was the way to do it. So we had this whole going and saying, this is stopping here. And I'm looking at healing. I'm looking at breaking these chains, like being the cycle breakers here, and healing from the job that our parents did. Like, and it's like, I think that's just like a broad way to put it. It's not saying they did good or they did bad or they're a good person, they're a bad person, they're this or that. We're just going to go ahead and set that aside for a moment and say the job that they did, whatever it is, the job that they did, we're healing and recovering and gathering our pieces and finding our self, not the self that's been passed down from generation of what self should be, what your role is. And by doing that, we also have to then reflect back and see all the ways that our children have to heal from that, because we did carry it on until we hit a part of, oh, this stops and we're shifting. But it wasn't in time, right? But you look at it that way, and like, 'cause my vision would be, I would have done all the healing before I had kids so they didn't have to heal. That's not what happened. But I'm doing it now, and I've been doing it. And so when you look at that age bracket, I think like we're the like the possibility, like the channel where it showed that there's a different way. There's a different way no matter where and maybe you're 60 and you're like, I'm implementing this now. I'm seeing it now and I'm stepping into it. And that is courageous and amazing. And I just want to cheer you on, like wherever you are in your age. But as that's happening, as we're making emotional healing, energetic healing, physical healing, therapy, mental healing, all of these things, not only not as stigmatized, but more normal. Now, granted, it's out there. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health. I'm not saying that it's not there, but it's more common for people to step into that space now. They're learning how to step into that space. There's more people, there's more resources available. It doesn't mean it's always good resources, but there are more resources available where that's starting to be a thing. And younger generations, the Z's and the alphas, or I guess the alphas aren't, but anyways, the Z's are like, they're stepping into that space way young, before they have kids, before they get the option to say more readily whether or not they want kids. I didn't know that was an option. It was like, this is your job. You have kids. This is the only way you will ever be fulfilled. This is your role.
Yeah, it's the path.
It's your path. And so they're gonna be like, I don't even know if I want kids, but I'm gonna go ahead and take care of all the shit that I gotta heal. I'm working on myself, and they're doing it in a really bold, unapologetic way. It's also kind of funny because they're lashing out, which we also get to be proud of, that we kind of taught them how to do.
Right.
Like, you get to say, no, this doesn't work. You get to say, so we're healing what we've experienced and we're being accountable and growing from what we caused. Is that kind of like, that's what I'm thinking when you're talking about the split in the generation? Is that kind of?
Yes, like I can fully recognize like the shift that you and I have made where we now think completely differently, right? And I mean, if we were parenting newborns or toddlers, or do you know what I mean? We would be doing things in a much different way than we did 20 years ago when we were raising kids that were really little. We
wouldn't be do as I say.
Right. It would be a lot different.
Yeah.
But I also want to, like, I fully acknowledge and recognize too that the work that you and I have been able to do and the space that you and I have been able to like step into comes from the work of the previous generation.
Right.
Like, I fully agree that, you know, each generation progressively gets better. So like every generation in some ways has cycle breakers. Like even our parents in some ways broke cycles from their previous generation.
Right.
Right. So I recognize that. And I'm not sitting here being like, it was only the millennials, just the Gen Xers that did anything. All the rest of you all are fucked. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But it's also interesting to note, like, it seems like that shift was sped up for us.
Yeah.
Where you might see, you know, like if you think, I think back to like growing up when I was a kid, and all my parents, I had so many parents. No, my parents and then all of my friends' parents, it didn't seem like a lot of them were going to therapy. It didn't seem like a lot of them were challenging the standard of whatever society says is supposed to happen, right? Now, I wasn't looking for it when I was a kid because I couldn't understand it or see it. But reflecting back and looking back, a lot of just continual same stuff over and over and over again across the board with all of those parent relationships that I witnessed, right? All of my friends, my parents, your parents, like a lot of really similar stuff. So you don't see a lot of cycle breaking.
Right.
But at the same time, they had to have in some regards. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today.
Right.
But it seems like our generation is full of people that are breaking patterns and changing those cycles.
Doing things different.
Doing things differently. So I think it has sped up.
Yeah.
And I think that social media and the internet and information and connection and like the ability for us.
Our world's got to be much bigger. We have to see other possibilities, other perspectives other than just like our tiny space of where we were.
Yeah. And our generation is the first generation with the internet. Right?
Yes.
We're the ones that got to experience it from the very beginning.
Right.
We watched it be birthed. We watched, like, we went and picked up the baby internet and held it in our hands as it frickin' had that dial tone. That, you know, that's my feeble attempt.
It was perfect.
Perfect, spot on.
Perfect.
And that, I think, is one of the big contributing factors as far as to why we've been able to shift and change as much as we have, right? Because we have been seeing it and absorbing it and feeling it and looking at it and confronting it. And that also means that, because this also happens all the time too, where I think we moved to Tennessee, and Tennessee is different than where we came from.
Yes, it is.
Tennessee is different than other places. And there's some things that happen here in Tennessee that to us look and feel like it, like this is still happening in 2023.
Right.
Like this still exists in the world. And of course it does.
Right.
Right. Of course it does. Of course these kind of things. And like, I don't want to get into the weeds about what I'm talking about necessarily, but I'm like the level of what's acceptable in society in some of the rural places that we have encountered here in Tennessee is vastly different than, you know, other places across the country and the world, which I know that. Like, it's obvious, right? That makes total sense. But then to live the experience of it and to like be here in our house in the year 2023, where we think and act and believe the way that we do, and then right next door, some other reality of existence is happening. So just the fact that information is more readily available doesn't mean that it's actually going to change, right? People have to have access to that information first and foremost, right? which we're lucky to have access to this information. And we've had access to the internet and to information and to all of these things our whole life from, the time that we were kind of like 10, 11 years old. And not everybody does have that.
Right. Some people still like in this day and age have never like had it readily available where they couldn't go somewhere else, like had it from their home. There's so much that we definitely take for granted and have had access to that has shaped our condensed our mindset of like, how is this not everybody just because we've had access to things.
Like you helped me see this in some ways because our son is he's a senior in high school, so we're still involved with like high school stuff and school stuff. So we're still trying to communicate with the school, and the school communicates with us. And where we came from, the majority of that was all done online.
Yeah.
Where they would send out emails every now and then with information for this event or that event or whatever was coming up. And where we live now, they make a phone call. And so on a daily basis, we're getting like these phone calls of the superintendent letting you know about the football game tonight or the arts festival this weekend, or Johnny's not going to be picking up on his normal bus route, so Susie's going to be picking up on the bus route. And I'm like, all of this stuff is, why can't they just send emails? We don't need phone calls all day long. And you're like, some people don't have access to internet. And I'm like, oh. So it really like made me push pause for a minute and recognize like the assumption is that all of this information and all of this awareness, and how can you not know about this, that, or the other? Some people just don't know. Yeah. So it's naive to think that simply because you know something that somebody else knows something, right? We forget about their lived experience. We forget about what they're going through. We also forget about their opportunity, right? And where they're at. And that is kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to our parents' generation or the generations before us. Excuse me. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. There wasn't a lot of readily available information, right? We think about how much information is manipulated and presented to us today, right? So much of information that we're getting from quote unquote the mainstream sources of media and information is tailored. We see it plain as day now. They didn't, 30 years ago. They didn't back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, although it 100% was exactly the same. It was the information that they wanted to be shared and that they wanted out there. And that, I think, is another big thing that makes our generation different, because we went from believing everything that our parents told us and believing everything that society told us.
Believing what our community experienced and expressed was what it was.
What it was. And then suddenly it was like, wait a minute, we're seeing things very, very differently now because we have access to the internet and to different information. Right. So in your mind, and if you can't think of this right off the top of your head, no harm, no foul.
Okay,
but
well, my
what are some of these beliefs, not necessarily that you're facing right now, but what are some long-held beliefs that you almost were oblivious to until you weren't anymore?
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't know that I can answer that right now. My belly totally lit up and started like churning, and I'm panicking right now. And whenever I panic, I cannot, like, that's an easy question, but I'm totally panicking. So let's see. Let's take a pause and see if I can pull something. The first thing that's coming to my mind, and I realize that this isn't quite the direction you were going, but it's the first thing that came up. So I'm going to go ahead and speak to that, is that the ultimate self-sacrifice is the only way that you can show love. And then that's like you have to sacrifice everything and like gut yourself. And then that's how you show love. You have to take everything, and that's how you show love. And that was something that was like just that strong thing. I'm very dry in the throat right now. I'm like, that's not the angle we were going. I was not prepared for that question. So I'm sorry that I'm not. I keep saying too. I don't want to do that.
Like I said, no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, no harm, no foul. Sure.
It's the because essentially
Why don't you
that's
answer that question?
well, that's what I've been looking at.
my
Is
goodness.
it's like over the last couple of years, you and I have shifted up so much beliefs, and like for me personally, one of the big ones was I thought for a really long, and this is gonna like I feel really foolish saying this,
Okay.
but I thought for a really long time that I knew what I was doing.
Oh, okay.
Like I thought that I had everything under control. I thought that I knew, like not just right from wrong, but I knew what was like. I thought that I knew what was right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Like it's not necessarily like
I think everybody can relate to that to some degree, and at some point in their life that they thought that,
like, oh, I know what's right.
right?
And I base that off of my lived experience, and I'm intelligent. And of course, there's new ideas and people have different opinions, and I account for all of those things. But when it comes to my life, my choices, my decision, my family, my children, everything, I know what's right. I know what to do
Yeah.
because I've lived enough and I have enough wisdom. And all of that just like went clear out the fucking window a few years ago, where it's like, I have no idea what
Yeah.
I'm doing. I have no idea what's right. Right. Like parenting is a really good example of this, where it's like, I used to think we knew what we were doing as parents. And I used to think that we had a really good firm grasp on like, oh yeah, we're good parents. And we were, and we are, and all those kind of different things. And then there's another slight shift to the left where it's like, oh, we don't have any fucking idea what we're doing. None.
Yeah. No
Right.
idea, and we fucked up royally.
Well, that's because we now have been able to look back and reflect and see.
Yeah.
So the belief of like, we could do no wrong as parents.
Oh, I didn't have that belief.
I know, but I didn't either. But it's like, it's the same belief that I think our parents have, where it's like, I did the best that I could in the moment, and that alone alleviates any responsibility because I was doing the best that I could. Sorry, I did the best that I could in the moment.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to like deal with the consequences of my choices and actions because I'm using that as an excuse of like, sorry, I did the best that I could. And now I know better and I'm trying to do better, but it doesn't help you anymore because you're not a kid anymore, right? And I think about that in regards to our relationship, where it's like, yeah, sorry, I'm doing the best that I can. Like it's such a scapegoat, like, do you know what I mean? It's such a bypassing of any actual accountability and any responsibility. But in my head at the time and in those moments, like I said, rewind 10 years ago, I would have thought that that was me being responsible. That was me owning my imperfections. That was me showing up and actually taking accountability. So that belief had to be questioned, right? And that required me to really reflect and look and deal with the truth of what, at least in this moment, feels like, oh, I actually didn't know. And I don't actually know if I do know today what I'm doing as a parent or as your partner, or do you know what I mean, as an adult in this world. And so I'm just really open to realizing that all of my quote unquote beliefs or ideas that I had about myself or the way that I was moving through my life, I'm just doing the best that I can to not let those go, because not all of them necessarily need to be shifted or changed, right? But a lot of them I think need to be looked at least for me. And so when ideas, thoughts, and beliefs about myself or about my interaction with the world around me, whether it's you or our children or our friends or, you know, social media, like we engage a lot with people online. And I try to look at it from that perspective now, where it's like, I don't know what I'm talking about necessarily, at least not from the perspective of how I used to feel, where I felt like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. I'm speaking with confidence because I have this intelligence and this lived experience. And now it's more of like, I'm speaking from a place of, yes, confidence in some regards and some topics, but at the same time, from this place of like, I don't have any idea, right? Ram Dass talks about, one of the things that he really enjoyed doing, and I say enjoyed because obviously he's passed away, but he would sit with people when they were dying, sometimes like right at the end, and sometimes, you know, the week before or something like that. So he would spend a lot of time with people as they were in that last phase of their life. And the reason why he liked doing it was because everything was gone, meaning they no longer had any of these preconceived notions about all the things that we kind of lay ourselves up with in this experience of being human, where, you know, I'm a man, I'm 42 years old, my name is Craig, I'm married to Stephanie. I have this whole story around what my life exists as. And he talks about it from that perspective of like, all of that's gone and you're just two human beings. And he's like, wow, what's it like over there? And they're like, it's crazy. This is what it's been like. This is what I'm dealing with right now. And he's like, that's amazing. Because there's clarity that comes when you let all of these things fall. All the ideas that you have about yourself, all of these beliefs, all of these notions of right and wrong. And it just all falls away in those moments. And he was able to kind of meet people in that space and really sit with them and feel what it was like to have that exchange with a person, with a human, with a spirit, with somebody that was like acknowledging, oh yeah, it's a crazy ride, dude. This is what it's been like for me. And he's like, that's amazing. So I think about that a lot when we're interacting with people online, because we'll share something, we'll share a post, a reel, or some piece of content. And of course, not everybody agrees with it, which is great. And sometimes people are responding back with their thoughts and ideas about it. And those thoughts and ideas aren't always positive. And I have to really be cognitive of how I'm responding to those people in that moment, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. Do you know what I mean? Whereas before I used to respond with that understanding or that perspective of like, oh, I know what's right. And I'm not saying I used to respond that way. I'm saying like that was my thought process. I feel like I'm losing you. I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're doing good.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated at how different of an experience it's been.
For you?
Yeah.
I'd
and
love
so
to
it's
hear
like
it.
really, really cool. I'm like, that is crazy. It's funny. It's that thing that we say of where we're usually coming from the same place, just a lot of times different ends of the spectrum. And it's so that, and it's like, this is wild right now. Mine is like, I lost that, that belief that I knew what I was doing very early on. And then I had it reiterated. Like, then I started to like self-deprecate to my parents. Like, I don't have a clue. I'm so scared. I thought I knew what I was doing. I don't know. And they're like, yeah. And they would make fun of me for all of my bad choices and the things that I had did and should have listened, like rubbing it in. And so I lost all confidence. Like, I hit rock bottom, like the garbage that I thought I was, like I lost all confidence. And I did not, like, I had beliefs and opinions about people, of course. But I second guessed everything. I couldn't make a choice. Like, I was always deferring like to my parents of all people, for parenting, like how to parent my kids, what to do. I didn't know what to do. Like I think about that now and how crazy that is.
I know.
But after I hit that point of like, oh, I'm nothing, I'm garbage, I'm a mistake, everything that I do, like when I fully embodied it, it was like any thought that I had, I couldn't trust. And anything that I did on my own, I paid for. And so that just reiterated it. So I was always looking for somebody to tell me what the right thing was to do, to tell me what, and then super scary when I had conflicting people that were like dominant roles in my life that were saying, no, do this, no, do this, and then getting mad at me for not being able to chill. I'm like, what the fuck? It was so chaotic. And what's shifted for me is being like, oh, I actually do know. I'm not saying I know what's best for the world, but I know what's right for me. I know what I should do in this moment. And whether it's the right choice or not, it's the choice I want to make. And so mine has been tuning out what other people think I should do and what I should be doing and how I should act and how I should respond, and have started to trust my own compass. And I still don't, right? There's still like, I'm like, oh, this is me. And there's areas where I still defer, where I'm still like, oof, but I'm practicing not. And like, really, I had to like shut out a lot of the world in a sense, and not in a isolation way, which also isolation, but I had to like close all the windows, all the doors, like everybody just shut the fuck up and let me think, let me feel. I need to make this choice here. I need to feel. And I had to like really clear out a lot of space just so I could hear my voice, because it's so loud with everybody else. It's so, so loud. And so I love that I'm in this space of hearing myself, starting to listen to my own voice, and not a know all, be all, say all, and the world should revolve around what Steph thinks. But my world, what I do, that gets to come from me. And how fascinating that you're in the space of where you're not saying it is like, you should do this and you should do that, and like, I know what people should do. And you're like getting like centered in the same way and listening to your own voice and being like, okay, maybe there's more here than I know. There's more here to hear. And so it's still both a going inward, but you're like, you're listening, and I'm trusting. And by trusting, I'm still seeking mentors. I'm still seeking help. I'm not sitting over here and being like, but I'm choosing the people that get to help guide me now, instead of being guided by the people who think they have a right to guide me, or who like whatever roles, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm choosing who has access to me and who I listen to and trust for guidance. Does this feel like a good direction? I'm listening and I'm hearing. And it doesn't mean that everything you say is gospel.
Right.
I'm just like, if it resonates, I'm taking it. I'm allowing to be challenged. I'm allowing to stretch and grow. And I'm allowing my voice to say, no, at least that doesn't resonate with me. It's just so funny. It's like fascinating. We're on such different ends, but I think we're doing the exact same thing.
I do too.
We're still like lighting that flame in us and listening to that.
Yeah.
And
I do too.
Taking accountability for our own actions. And I'm not making it everybody else's choice, like my responsibility, and you're not, like, I don't know. It's just fascinating. It's like it's such a polarity that is the perfect mirror, but it's not like a side-by-side mirror. It's, I guess we could say, an up and down, not that one's lower and one's higher, but it's the opposite, but it's the same thing. It looks like we're moving the same hand, but I'm moving my right hand. And when you move your same hand, you're moving your left hand when we're facing each other. It's the same thing, but it's the opposite. And it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating.
The idea that there's a right and a wrong.
Right?
Do you know what I mean? Like, that alone is a belief that I really had to question. And I think making peace with that was what also opened up like the next door to even question things further and get more comfortable. And for us, I think this happened a few years back. I was in therapy. We were both in therapy at the time, but my damn therapist, even though I loved him, was really good at always saying, like, can't it be both? Because every time I would come up with some scenario or some issue that I was dealing with or something that I was facing, and a lot of times it was in our relationship, and not always, right? But there was always this point where I was like, I wish that it could be this, but in reality it's that. Or, I wish that this didn't exist because it's causing me to feel this way, right? If only that thing was gone. But as soon as he would say that, he would just say it like, can it be both? Can it be both? It's like over and over and over again. And then it was finally like, yeah, it can. Like, two seemingly opposite, polar opposite things can coexist at the same time. And neither one of those things has to be right, and neither one of those things has to be wrong in order for them to be valid. Meaning, your lived experience and how you see things is valid and real and true for you. And the same goes for me.
Right.
And those two things can coexist as well as contradict each other at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a really long time for me to kind of deal with and experience. Like, Ram talks about them from the perspective of, that's the paradox.
Yeah.
Where you're sitting in the uncomfortable truth of, like, between a rock and a hard spot, where you recognize that those two things are happening and you don't know what to do about it. You don't know which direction to go or what decision to make. And he's like, just sit there. Like, that's the work. The work isn't stressing about it or pushing it away or ignoring that that side might have a good point of view or a good perspective or whatever the case may be. That the work becomes just sitting with the uncomfortableness of those two things coexisting in the same space within your body at the same time. And the more that I've done that, and that's what happens when we're like, same thing with you and me. I mean, like, our relationship is, you know, the micro version of the bigger thing, because there's so many times where I have to sit with what you're experiencing and recognize that that's what you're experiencing and it's real and it's true. And I see it completely different.
Yeah.
And I also see it from a perspective, because there's still that part of me that thinks I'm right. So I also see it from like, yeah, keep sitting there doing that thing as long as you need to, but eventually you'll see it my way,
Right.
and you'll come out of that place. Like, that part of me still exists, but I'm not.
I have a part that gets mad at you when you don't see it my way too.
Right.
Because now I'm getting like, so I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, ugh. So I have to like watch to not.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, dude. And then I'll try to talk to you and you're just like, nah. I'm like, no, just let me explain it to you.
Right.
Just
I have to explain it enough so
Right?
that you'll get it. 'Cause
Right?
As soon as I explain, I do that all the time. I did that with this episode.
Right.
Leading up to it the last couple of days, I'm like, no, wait a minute. Let me explain it in a way that it'll make sense to you. And you're like, it's still not making sense.
But this episode is making sense.
So it's sitting in those uncomfortable places where those two polar opposites exist.
Yeah.
And I can see it across the board. It's the same thing as we're engaging with people online, where they'll say something that I'm like, that's wrong. I don't agree with that. That's way off.
Yeah.
Or I have a judgment or a criticism about what they have just said or shared. And in my mind, right, because I've created this imaginary, illusionary place where I'm always right, I believe that I can see where they're coming from. But where my perception of where they're coming from has more to do about me than it has to do with them in reality.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter, like, when we think about it, kind of like the themes of consciousness, right? If somebody is coming from shame, or they're in that guilt and judgment, or they're coming from fear, right? They're in that really fear-based mentality. We know a lot of people like this, right? And this is something that people see all the time in reality as well, right? People that are afraid of everything, that look at every situation through the lens of like, well, what if this happens?
Right.
What if that happens? You better be ready for this.
I
You better be ready
struggle
for
with that hard. That
Right?
was my default. And I constantly have to work in that space and try to overcome it. I know exactly what you're talking
Right.
about.
And on the outside, I can look at somebody from what I deem, right, from my own judgment of myself as a loving place of seeing them in fear. And I'm like, I validate, I see, I acknowledge. And I also don't rush to tell them not to be afraid.
Right. Don't be afraid.
Or
Why didn't you say so?
tell them you're just in fear right now,
Right.
when in reality you can think about it from this other perspective. And because that is that's Craig looking and seeing something which has fuck all to do with that person,
Yeah.
right? So that person is presenting something to me for me. It's all about me. Right? If I recognize that person online that responded to a comment on one of our reels is in fear right now, that doesn't help that person. Do you know what I mean?
Keep going.
That
Keep elaborating.
helps me see that person in a way that connects with me so that I can see that person with compassion and love.
There you go. Okay.
Because it has to do with me and my understanding and my processing and my lived experience and my knowledge
Right.
and my information has fuck all to do with that person actually being in fear. Or even if they are in fear, that really doesn't matter to them in that moment. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, right? A lot of times people are in fear and they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
But again, that's me and my lived experience and my judgments and my criticisms and my observations. Like, an observation is different than a judgment or
Yes,
a
it is.
criticism, right? Sometimes I'm just observing things. And of course, sometimes I'm judging them as well.
Right.
But
Is that healthy discernment?
it's that recognition of like, I think a lot of people get caught up in thinking that their lived reality and their lived experience and what they believe to be right or wrong, it's then up to them to share that with the world and make sure that the world believes it, right? Especially if somebody comes at them with some sort of counter argument or alternative idea or belief. Like, it's a rarity nowadays. I shouldn't say it's a rarity. There's a lot of people that are really open-minded and compassionate and loving and everything like that, right? But there's also a lot of people that are like, no, that's wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah.
The way that you're looking at it is wrong. Even if they
I still have those judgments myself.
I do too. And there's so many times that, because we do that with each other still too, where it's like, oh, you're just looking at it through the lens of fear. You're just in fear. So you're seeing it. You're seeing it wrong, right? And I don't know, all of this is so nuanced too, because so much of this is like, this is what I'm talking about. It's the questioning of all of these beliefs and these ideas. This idea that there is only a right and a wrong. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to classify all of human life and experience and relationships and dynamics and, you know, everything in those one or two categories. It's back to the binary again of good and evil, love and light,
can only be one.
Love and dark, or yeah.
There
can only be.
It's either you're right or you're wrong.
Exactly. Instead of allowing for.
And you're not allowed to be wrong. So even if like that shrinks down the ability to change your mind, you have to double down on being wrong, because there's only right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find out something different, then you can't allow that in. You have to really hold it, because then that means you're wrong. And there's such a, you can't be wrong, because then you are wrong, because then you're bad, because.
Like, how often do they have the scientific discovery where suddenly we were right all along, we knew it and we figured it out. And then 50 years later, they're like, you know, that thing we thought we were really right about, turns out we were dead wrong.
I love how science is like, there's so much of it is theory. Like
Good
that you're
science,
going there,
right?
Right? It's no, but like,
there's my criticism and judgment again.
Well, that's totally where I'm going with my criticism and judgment. Just wait for it. I'm winging it out here. But it's like everything is theory, right? And even things that are no longer theories, that are fact, came from a fact that shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it like fascinating, because you have the there are areas in that field where they are willing to continue to look, when it's like, when they're looking at the theories, when it's the oh my gosh, what is my brain is forgetting what they're called, so we'll just keep moving on. But there's so much like the science, the doctors,
the hypothesis,
is
that the word you were looking for?
No, not that word. I'm trying to think of the like quantum physics, and how they're like, oh, everything is possible and nothing is as it seems. And like, they're willing to dive in, but there's like a large chunk of that are like, no, this is fact. This is fact. I'm like, it's a theory. Yeah. This is fact. And they're not willing to be, even though it's changed so many times, as soon as they have that, they're like, it is unbendable. But they're finding everything is bendable. Everything is mutable. Everything is changing. And it's some of the hardest double downing is coming in that term, with the religion being a big part. But the science is such a beautiful thing, because it is evolving. Theories are beautiful because they're guiding us and leading us. And then we get to change perspective. Like I just learned, probably, I think within the last 5 years, how much of we were taught in school, how much science, how much all of that is actually theory. And they didn't, like, even the theory of evolution, right? Mm-hmm. Even they said that's the only one that's really been really boffed because of religion. But like the layers of the earth is a theory. Like, I was like, what? That's fact. Right. We know the layers. We know their depth. We know what that's
in my mind.
That's a guess. Like, they've clearly drilled. Exactly. Like, they know it. Like,
in my mind, I've seen that diagram where they show the
I'm seeing it right now.
So they've done it. They've already done that research. This is fact.
Fact.
And then you're like, wait a minute. Yeah. So we actually don't know.
We have no idea. It could be
what the core of our planet is.
Journey to the center of the earth. It could be a whole universe in there. It could be anything. And they're like, no, it is this. You don't know. Yeah. And how would that have changed like the way that we think and the way that we're going if that's how it was taught. This is a theory. This is what we believe to be true at this point. This is what we used to think. And now we think this, and the possibilities, if they like opened up minds for possibility and we're learning, this is what we know today. And tomorrow it could be this, instead of being like, this is fact, study it, answer it absolutely correct on the test. This is what you're memorize and parrot back.
Mm-hmm.
What we say, there's no room for you to think. Memorize and parrot back. Memorize and parrot back. Don't you dare challenge.
Right.
If you challenge, you're a fool. You're stupid. You have no, it's just like, it's fascinating to me how hard and fast that right and wrong rule is. And it's none of that.
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah. I think it, like, if we break it down to this, to the binary of right and wrong, good and bad, light and dark, right? That is such a seemingly, and I say seemingly because, again, we're coming at it from this perspective of like, this is a belief that we have because we live in this reality and this existence and this culture and in this society where we have placed so much value on the binary option of right and wrong. So much of our life, like, you can argue, there's an argument to be made that our entire existence on this planet as human beings incarnated into this fucking matrix, whatever this might be, the defining characteristic of this reality is two opposite things coexisting at the same time. Right now, the sun is shining outside of our house and outside of our window, and we are in sunshine right now. And at exactly the same moment in time, it's pitch black somewhere on this planet.
Right.
Right. So it's interesting that we are so defined by it, and yet it is obvious to us that two things can coexist at the same time. And yet we resist it so much, right? Where it becomes the doubling down of I'm right and you're wrong. Well, I feel like I'm right based off of my lived experiences, my programming, my whatever level of intelligence or education or just self-assurance in myself, right? My belief in myself and it's like I was talking earlier where I thought I was right.
Yeah.
Right. I spent a huge chunk of my life thinking like I knew that I was right. I was educated. I had life experience. I had all of this knowledge. I had all of these things. It's like, yeah, I'm a good resource for people to come to if you need help or advice, or, you know, if you want to know how to, I don't even fucking know, right? Mow your lawn or something. But now it's the realization of like, oh, I know nothing other than what to me feels like a foundational belief that is super important for me in my growth and my evolution and my healing, is this thing of two things can coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
Two opposites can inhabit simultaneously the same space. And then you can pick that apart even further and be like, well, no, like if we think about it from like a molecule or an atom or an electron or a neutron or whatever, right? So on and so forth. But all of those things, again, fall back underneath the caveat and the umbrella of like, those are theories.
Right.
Those are ideas. Those are thoughts that you have because some scientist or some person, or do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't even think
We're learning. Everything is learning. And I like your right and wrong thing. Like, you get to be right for you. Like that gets to feel right for you. And you're still a good resource. You're like, yeah, I'm a good resource. You can come to me. That is fact. You're right for you and you are a good resource. People can come to you. I think where it gets like convoluted is where if I'm right for me, I'm also right for you.
Yes.
And you need to abide by what I think is right. And like you use lawnmowers, mowing lawn as an example. So then the problem is, oh, I'm going to go over to my neighbor now and let them know they're mowing the lawn wrong.
Right.
That lawnmower is, they shouldn't even have that kind of lawnmower.
Yeah.
This is like, and the fact that they're even choosing to mow their lawn is like, you know, all of the things of when you take your right for you and demand that everyone else has the same right.
Yeah.
That is.
Like if you can wrap your mind around the idea that two opposites can coexist at the same time, then suddenly it opens up this whole other, like I said earlier, it's this other door into this new world where you're like, oh, wait a minute. Me and you can actually be right at the same time, because that right feeling that we have, or that insight that we have, is based off of perception, knowledge, life experience, you know, truth. It's all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where some people don't have access to
Right.
the internet. And you're like, well, how can they not know?
Right.
Well, they just don't know. 'Cause-
I had that
yeah.
same thing, especially before we moved here. I'm like, by now, if you don't know, it's a choice.
It's a
You're
choice,
making that
right?
choice to do it. And I thought that was,
Yeah.
I'm like, whoo,
Exactly.
I was really, really wrong there. I was doing
Yeah.
that thing that I don't think people should do.
Yeah.
Saying like, you must live by this thing.
Yeah, we did a reel recently that was talking about like what women are dealing with the most, like what's the biggest issue for women in relationships and what's the biggest issue for men in relationships. And some of those got some real, not negative, but there's some people that feel very strongly about what you just said, right? Where especially when it comes to men being emotionally just fucked in every which way that we can imagine. And then I know it's not just men, of course, right? Emotionality and connection and emotional vulnerability and all of those things are stuff that we all struggle with regardless of gender. But this person responded to that reel with such a firm statement of like, oh, they know. Like the argument is you can no longer exist in the world not realizing that you're emotionally stunted or that there's a different way to do it. Right. And I'm like, but the reality is they might not.
They might not.
They just simply might not have that awareness. And it seems so strange to us that they couldn't have that awareness because it's so obvious to what we believe to be everybody else. But the reality is we always have to remind ourselves that they might not just know. And that doesn't mean suddenly that it's your opportunity to educate them. Oh, you don't know? Well, let me educate you, right? That's the fucking white people have been doing their whole life is, you know, educating the world with all the information and knowledge that we've accumulated. And, you know, now we know how things work. So we're going to go and spread the word.
There's also something else I want to just add to that real fast. Just because somebody might, like that whole, they know, they might not. And they might know, they might have awareness, and that doesn't mean that they have the tools that they were ever shown it was a possibility. You have this awareness, but like I know that I'm aware of trigonometry.
Right.
Can't fucking do it.
Well, it's no different than like,
and like that's a big thing, but
we know smoking was bad for us.
Yeah,
Still
perfect.
Still did it.
Yeah.
Right.
And tried so hard to change so much and could not, and then had straight up, I have no intention of stopping.
So the man
I
out
like
there
smoking.
that is like just unable to show up with emotions might very well know that they are doing that and they can't stop. Yeah. So knowledge doesn't equal change, right?
Yeah. And that's not it's QC that you still don't have to like give them access to you. It's not saying just you know.
Exactly.
But to be so like, you know better and you're just not doing better and you're wrong might be true. It might be. There's people that very much, it might be. Yeah. And it could be the farthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
It could be so wrong.
I think it's most likely the latter the majority of the time, where everybody, and this is the other thing that I really truly believe is the more that I sit with all of these things and kind of the way that we engage with people and talk with people, and even just in our lived experience, right? It's not necessarily online all the time. I think everybody's doing the best that they freaking can. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's literally just trying to do the best that they can. And it's not easy. Right. Like that's the other thing though. Like I was about to go down the rabbit hole of like, this isn't easy. This is really hard. Living life, all these things are really hard. That's a belief.
That is a belief.
That's a fucking program that I'm almost certain I was given. Yeah. Right. Because I think about how often were we reminded that our parents work hard to give us what we get. Like our parent, like life is not easy. Life's going to throw everything. Like you got to be strong. You got to be determined. You got to blah, 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 because life is so fucking hard. Hey, I've been spending hours chilling in our hot tub, like drinking high C and eating cookies and watching the trees and listening to the birds. That's not hard.
It hasn't always been like that.
Life doesn't have to be hard. Yeah. And I don't mean like someday it will not be hard and you'll be able to sit in a hot tub and drink high C just like Craig.
You might.
What I mean is I've had to let go of that mindset that my life is actually hard. Right. My life isn't hard.
And you were making it very hard. It was very like hard. All the things like life is hard and I'm going to keep bringing in things to validate that.
And I'm
going
going to keep working hard so that it will get easy. And in reality, my life's real fucking easy. All I had to do was quit working hard. And
that
doesn't sound right.
Right.
But what I mean is the mindset.
It's challenging beliefs.
Right. It's not like we work hard.
We work hard.
We're embracing a disciplined life. Like we are showing up and doing work.
We're doing it differently, and we're choosing, I don't know.
But it doesn't have to be quote unquote hard.
Yeah.
And when life throws curveballs, when life is challenging, when life is hard, then it's even more of an opportunity to lean into what is that belief that you're actually confronting right now. Because I can think about some of the things that we've had to navigate this year, and some of them have felt really, really hard.
Yeah.
And truthfully, when I think about those things, and we're not going to go into them too much because we've done a good job of not crying this episode, but the thing that was hard was what I was holding on to.
Yeah.
The things that were hard were the ideas and the beliefs that I have been unwilling to let go of.
Yeah.
That made things hard.
Yeah.
So it's really imaginary. Life isn't actually that hard. Life is this beautiful gift. And when you think of it that way, it's like, well, who gave me this gift? We don't need to get bogged down in that. When you just recognize like, oh, this is a beautiful experience. And then you've got the other side that will immediately come in and be like, no.
Right. I'm fighting that side right now.
Life is all
I'm
about
like,
survival.
what you're saying is going to
Like,
hurt
look at
people.
the animal kingdom.
Right.
That's what life is. It's
I don't know.
eat or be eaten. It's all about go ahead and think of that, Craig, with your head in the clouds over there. The life is so easy. I'm like, well, okay, dude. Think about your perception. Think about your programming. Think about the lived reality. Like I've set down a lot of things for myself in the past couple of years, and it's turning out that life is actually kind of easy the more that I let go. So, food for thought.
Food for thought.
Okay, let's answer this question.
Okay.
So every episode of the podcast, we answer questions. You can call in those questions. That question is, or that number is...
It is move your can.
423-521-0355.
There it is.
Here's this week's question. Let's make sure it's up all the way. Pause for technical difficulties.
I can't hear it.
I know, right? We're just killing it today.
Greg, my name's Adam, and yes, you may share this on the podcast. I have kind of a complex situation between my parents and my wife and I. There's some disagreements after my son was born, and some of our wishes were not respected about his safety and some of the things my family wears, like perfume. Anyway, it was not received well, and this has gone on now. My son's almost 6.5 years old, and I'm still not healed from this huge division between my parents and my wife. And I realized that, building a new family, we kind of set aside some of our old family's ways, our original family unit. And I'm just having trouble addressing my family because they don't like to hear criticism. They will never apologize. And basically it would turn into a huge manipulation, just like every conversation about this situation has. Anyway, probably clear as mud, but love you guys, love the podcast, really appreciate all the work you're doing so I can do my work,
Adam goes on to share some more personal information there because obviously we don't want to share that on the podcast, but it's a really good question.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that comes to mind for you, babe?
It sounds like a really, really difficult. That's difficult and tough
That's
come
a
together. So
difficult
that's
situation.
a difficult situation. Like, that's just shitty. That's so hard to be pulled in those different directions. And like, when it comes to, I love that he said original family unit. When it comes to that situation, it is so hard to navigate between that old, right? That original, these programs as an adult when it formed as child. So there's still like that embodiment that is twisted there and wants your parents close, that wants that family, that has all of these things. What was your lifeline? And to feel like I'm rocking the boat, especially when it's really challenging. They're not going to take any accountability. They're not going to listen to what the boundaries that you hold for your family. And it's just to be thrown in those two places, like, that is so hard. That is such a hard, scary place to try and navigate, and to find a place in yourself where you can start to take a breath and set those boundaries is so scary. And what it comes down, like, just a broadly put, there isn't, like, fixing the relationship between your wife and your parents isn't something that you can do. It's not up to you to navigate that. And it sounds like that you're having like those same feelings as your wife in a sense, because you're mentioning your family's not taking accountability. They're not willing to like hear what you feel is to be safe around your child, which is, that's your choice. You get to choose that. So the fact that there is that separation, and it would be so much easier if everybody got along, which it would be, but it's not in your hands at that point. So it would be like, I would think there was a part of some really hard choices ahead, some really hard, difficult things for you to sit with. And that comes with the first thing that you're looking at is like, what is those boundaries that you have for your child, which you absolutely get to choose. You and your wife have the say in what is safe for your kid and what you want around them. Your family doesn't have to agree with you. They don't have to accept it. They don't have to go along with it. They don't have to think that you're doing the right thing. But if they want access, then they have to respect your boundaries. Or they cannot, and then things can continue on where they are. But finding that place of where you're setting those boundaries, you're not going to make everybody happy here. It doesn't, at least, that doesn't mean that people can't come to a conclusion and come to a unity later on. They absolutely can. But that comes with healthy boundaries. That comes with you setting boundaries that are right for you and your child. And that people get to decide how they're going to respond to those boundaries. Are they going to accept them, or are they not? Because it might not be right for them. They don't have to agree. Oh, my goodness.
It's such a hard one, isn't it?
It's such a hard one, because I know what I'm saying is like the thing that you're butting up against right now. And I think that the fact that you're butting up against that is just because that's the thing that you don't want to do. You don't want to set those boundaries. You just want it to be
just want
better.
it to work out.
And I totally get that.
Yeah.
And the I guess I don't want to say the reality, but the other aspect of it, the other perspective is those boundaries have to be set, and it might not work out the way that you want it to.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole like dealing with the in-laws and that whole dynamic is something that obviously we've clusterfucked our way through our whole relationship, right? And there's a lot of things that we could say right now as far as like, what should you do next? And Steph talked a lot about those things and boundaries and everything like that. And there's also like some hard truths of there's deeper things that are happening below all of this. This is just the surface level thing where these things are playing out. You have all sorts of preconceived ideas and notions and behaviors and patterns that are ingrained with your original family, with your parents, or if you have siblings or anything like that. All of those things are really driving what's happening right now. And it's easy to say up on the surface that, oh, you just need to set some boundaries and then let people experience those boundaries how they are. And that's one component of it. And that's what we would definitely recommend getting really interested in and curious about, and looking at healthy boundaries and being on the same page with your partner, and Like, you're not going
takes
to
a
make
lot
everybody
to get
happy,
there.
right? There's no way to move through this situation where everybody comes out immediately, meaning like the day after or the month after or the year after, better.
Mm-hmm.
This type of dynamic will take years to be processed and unfold, but it does need to get started. And then there's another part of it where the more you can look at your relationship with your parents and either the health of that or the unhealthiness of that relationship, the better off you're going to be in the long run, because it's going to help you probably in some of those boundary settings, because you're being manipulated regardless of their actions and choices, because of the way that you're like subconsciously manipulating yourself. Like, my guess is you probably stew over this quite a bit.
Yeah.
And every time it comes up, you're dreading it. And every time it's an issue, and every time there's a fight, every time there's an argument, then it's weighing really heavily on your mind. And that doesn't have anything to do with your partner, with your wife, with your kids, with your mom and dad. All of that is your own internal struggle. And it's stemming from those original relationships in the way that your parents taught you how to behave and react, especially in regards to them.
Right.
So a lot of what has to take place is you have to be able to step into this new dynamic that you want to create. But in order to do that, you're going to have to become a new person. You're going to have to become a new version of yourself. And in order to do that, you have to have awareness of the current version that you are. So that's like the deeper part of it, because shifting up a dynamic like this doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen with ease and grace. It happens sloppily over months and years of practice and work. And we'd love to pretend like it's really easy to just be like, well, here's the new boundary, mom and dad. And if you can't meet it, then you can't come over, and we're not coming over to your house. And do that if you can, right? That's great. But more often it looks like, hey, will you please stop doing this? Why? I'm doing this because I love you. I care about my grandkids, blah, 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 blah. All that nonsense.
You guys turned out just fine.
Right?
You're here. I've raised
Who
kids
are you?
before.
Who do you think you are telling us? We're your parents. We know how to do this, blah, blah. All of the bullshit that fucking adults and parents will do. Shouldn't say adults. That parents will do. You have to wade through all of those things and unpack all of those things along the way, while you're also processing some of these deeper things and recognizing what's actually at play, right? You have manipulation, you have control. And that, and not to say in my opinion, but from my experience, that was love. So your parents are trying to love you. They're trying to love their grandchild. They're trying to show you love in the way that they show love, which is through manipulation and control and an inability to take any accountability. And so that's that's what is the sticking point oftentimes when you deal with people like this, is because they think that they're showing love. They think that they're doing what's best. And in their mind, that's where they're coming from. You can't change that.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. The goal is to change how you see it. The goal is to recognize how your actions shape and influence that. And if that's not your program around love, like if love to you doesn't equal manipulation and control now in your present day life, and you want to change that, this is where that starts. This is your opportunity to start setting some of those boundaries and start doing some of that work. But it's hard.
Yeah.
It's so freaking hard.
I have a thought. One more that I want to add to you with that is that getting clear on what it is that you want. And just like you want to have your parents to have a relationship, a healthy relationship with you, with your family now, with you, your wife, and your child.
Exactly.
And so we're going to get like curious about that just for a moment. And you can even think about this in letter form, like reaching out to them. And I want us to be together. I want you to have an active role in our lives and in your grandchild's life, in my child's life. Maybe approach it that way. I want you to have an active role in my life and my child's life. And then you set the boundary. This is like, in order to be in our space, in order to participate in this, we need you to, or, oh gosh, I had it so perfectly. Like then there's the boundary, right? There's the healthy thing. It's not healthy for our child to have these scents around. It's not healthy so we would love you to come over, and we're excited to. Our boundaries are this. So there's no perfume, there's no whatever it is. And this is where it gets tricky. Okay. So you're saying you want them to be involved because it sounds like you do. Here is the boundary. It's clear. You do not have to explain your boundary. You do not have to be like, because the doctor said this, because I feel this, and it really like all of those things. No, you have your want. You want the family units to join together. These are the boundaries. And then you end it with, I really hope that we can find a way to make this. I really hope that you are able to respect our boundaries so we can spend more time together. So you're not saying they're doing anything wrong. You're not coming at them that they need to change their ways. You're saying, I want you in our lives. Here is what the boundaries are for our family. And we're opening that invitation for you. And we're hoping that you step into that space with us. And then you can take it another step and to be clear. And if that happens, if not, we're going to have a little bit of space. We're going to have more space. And it's not a threat. It's not an ultimatum. It's like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose to have space in our family unit until these boundaries can be met. You're not holding it over them. You're not making them change who they are. You're giving them full empowerment to hear your boundaries and decide whether or not they're stepping into them.
Yeah, they have complete control.
They have complete control. They're not doing anything wrong. They get the opportunity to choose whether or not your boundaries are something that they're going to step into. You're not asking them to change who they are. You're not asking them to do anything that hurts them. You're asking a boundary for you and your family to be met for the safety of your child. And it doesn't even have to be for that. You're asking for the boundary. This is what the boundary is. And this is what you plan to do here out.
Yeah.
This is your actions, your choice.
So boundaries aren't a way to push people out of your
Yes.
life. They're a way to keep people in your life. They're a way to keep people close to you that you love and care
That
about.
you want close to
but
you.
in a safe way
Yeah.
that feels safe and loving and kind for you based off of how you feel and your perceptions. So remember that, like, that's a really key thing. Like, hey, I'm setting this boundary with you because I want to keep you in my life, not because I don't want you in our life or I don't want you to see your grandchild. I want that to happen and I want those things to happen. And this is what that's going to look like.
Yes. Perfectly said.
Thank you so much for the question. We love when we get questions in. You can email them. You can call us at that number. Again, it's 423-521-0355. It's down in the show notes. And we want to hear from you on this episode as well. So what beliefs have you challenged? What are you looking at? Are you sitting in the same space of like Gen X and millennials are the awesomest generation ever? And we've done all the hard work of breaking cycles for everybody else. I'm teasing, of course, but let's hear from you guys. So anything else, babe?
That's it.
Expect the best.
Plan for the greatest.
We'll see you next week.